I must say, I was looking quite swagtastical last week.
Oh my god.
But now
I was
you need it
looking
with the
good.
matching socks.
Yeah, okay, so these past 2 weeks, I've been like super amazing. So if you guys can't see, my socks match the flannel, right? It looks good. I was debating for like 10 minutes today whether or not I wanted to wear white shoes or black shoes. But I figured since there wasn't any white on here, that I would wear the black shoes, but I didn't realize how open this would get. So now I'm thinking that I should have gone with the white because you can see the
Yeah, the
little
white
feet
shoes and
underneath.
then the socks would have off.
Yeah, I know.
Well, next
I blame
time.
your
I know.
roommates.
Next time.
They're letting you
yeah,
leave.
I blame my roommates too. And so yeah, I just wanted to start out by saying that I hope you guys have enjoyed the series so far, and these past couple of weeks. We've been getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and finally this week it lined up perfectly with spring break. I don't know how, but it did. That was not my intention when I started this series, but yes, but God, He purposed me 5 weeks ago to start this series, which is crazy to think that this is now the 6th week of ID. We've been doing this for a month and a half at this point, right? Yeah, I think that there's a little bit of applause. And it's going to be really cool looking back on these moments and seeing how God has used the moments that we're in right now to touch so many people. Once we do fill up this room and we get it to the point where we have to move from this location because it's not big enough, and just our willingness and our devotion now, right, being faithful with the small things is going to lead us to something that's so much greater in the future. I'm going to restart my timer here because I really didn't do it. Okay. And so I think that I would be pretty good at being a therapist. Okay. I like to give people advice. And I'm not always in a position where I can, give people advice all the time and whatnot. I'm not like the go-to advice guy that everybody goes to for every single problem. But when people do come to me, I feel like very honored, and I take it very seriously. The advice that I give and what I tell people, and I think some of it stems from just being thankful that people would reach out to me, but also, I like getting in other people's business a little bit too. And I think we can all relate to that to a certain degree. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I think I would be good at being a therapist, and I think it would be necessary because my mom told me that her purpose in life is to embarrass me. In other words, she said, she has told me before, and once again, she's watching this now, so she can verify this statement. I can give you her number if you want to verify this claim. But she has told me that she wants to make me need a therapist when I'm older, right? She has made it her life's goal to embarrass me to the point that I need a therapist. And so now I'm like immune to embarrassment, right? I used to be terrified of embarrassment. But I mean, really, I can't really be mad at my mom too much because a lot of it stems from me, right? So there was this one time, and it all goes back to when I was 4 years old, right? I was a cute little 4-year-old boy. We had been living down in North Carolina for a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. And my mom was inside in the house, probably getting dinner ready or doing some amazing thing that she always does at the house. But me and my younger sister were outside playing in the driveway. And so, I was just out there, and for whatever reason, I had the urge to go to the bathroom. And so, being 4 years old, instead of running all the way back inside, because when you're 4, you don't go to the bathroom like proactively, right? You don't think like, oh man, I feel like I need to use the bathroom, so I should probably go. Like when you're 4, you're just like, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm having such a fun time playing outside, and I'm just going to wait until it needs to happen. And so I got to that point, and so little 4-year-old Mitch just walks up to the side of our driveway, and we had trees, don't worry. We had trees that like guarded our house from our neighbors, right? So it's not like anybody could see me, but I squatted down under one of these trees and just went to the bathroom. And notice I said squat, and I am a man, so that implies a certain excursion from my body. Okay. And so I was so proud of myself. I was just like, this is amazing. This is great. I was like, Mom, come look at what I just did. So I ran inside, and I was like, Mom, come here. I want to show you something. And so bless her heart, she was probably thinking like, oh, he probably like got the chalk and was like drawing something really cute, or like he was probably out in the yard and like, oh, he made something for his sister and he's being the most adorable little baby ever. And so she goes outside, she follows me, she's all excited, and I'm like, Mom, look, I pooped. And then she's just like terrified, like she was so embarrassed, right? And so I think from that point on, she made it her life's goal to embarrass me. And so because of that, I'm now immune to embarrassment. I don't get embarrassed anymore, right? But all going back to being a therapist, because they ask you, how do you feel? How do you feel? Right? The feelings that we have, whether it be embarrassment or something else, the feelings that we have carry a lot of weight in our lives, right? The feelings that we walk around and carry in our daily life a lot of the times inform the decisions that we make, and the emotions that we portray are often linked to the feelings that we have inside of us. And so this past couple of weeks we've been going through the series Wholehearted. Now, Juan, you might be looking at this and going, you misspelled whole. No, I didn't misspell whole, because we've been learning how to make our hearts truly whole, right? Truly complete. But we have to do that. We have to realize that there are holes in our heart that we need to fill in order for God to make our hearts truly whole. And so the statement that we're concluding today is, all of us are born with God-sized holes in our heart that can be filled with anything we let it to make it seem whole. And we have learned how to let God fill the holes in our heart to make it truly whole. In the verse that we've been walking through, Proverbs 27:19, which says, as water reflects the face, so a man's heart reflects the man. And so it's been a really cool study for me just going through. And so you guys might have remembered that from last week, I took us through the progression of the slides getting darker and darker and darker. And so last week I said, okay, we're at the deepest part, right? Essentially, everything leading up to this week was part one, right? I just didn't want you guys to sit here for 2.5 hours on one night. And so I split it up into 4 weeks. But that's essentially like the past 4 weeks have been part one. This is part two. And so we are now wholehearted, full circle. Completely white background. And so that is now where we are in our study. And so the passage I'm using this week is from John 14, verses 25 through 31. So I'm just going to read through that real quick. It says, these things I have spoken to you while I am still with you. This is Jesus addressing the disciples. He's just promised them the Holy Spirit and the presence of God that will be left with them once he dies and raises from the dead, right? But the Helper, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, he will teach you all things and bring you remembrance of all that I have said to you. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. You heard me say to you, I am going away, and I will come to you. If you loved me, you would have rejoiced, because I am going to the Father, for the Father is greater than I. And now I have told you before it takes place, so that when it does take place, you may believe. I will no longer talk much with you, for the ruler of this world is coming. He has no claim on me, but I do as the Father has commanded me, so that the world may know that I love the Father. Rise, let us go from here. And so, what I want to speak to you guys, the perspective of this week, is heart feelings, right? And so, I'm using heart feelings instead of gut feelings. That's the shift that I want us to make. That is the conclusion to this week. And we'll talk about, I'm back to the 3 P's this week. Back to the 3 sermon points that are all P's. So last week was a little bit off, but I still had principles, remember. That's still P's. But I'm preaching from 3 P's again this week. But this week it's going to be 3 P's that God gives us when we make our heart whole, right? And so we'll explore and remind ourselves a little bit of how God makes our heart whole. But then once He has made it whole, we can trust the heart that He has given us, right? And so we need to base our decisions off of the heart that God has given us and has given us access to. And so these heart feelings that we have are in the place of gut feelings, right? Making decisions that are quick, that are uninformed, or that are informed by the wrong things. And so we need to move from making a gut decision to making a heart decision. Right? That's the big shift that I want us to experience. And so just to set that up a little bit, I'm going to go back to verse 27. We'll be in verse 27 a lot tonight. I really, really like verse 27, but we'll start with a little passage from verse 27. There's 3 different parts of verse 27 that we'll look at. The first is, not as the world gives you, do I give to you. Right? Jesus is saying and separating Himself from the world. He's saying, I give differently than the world does. Right? And so, by the way, I think this picture looks really, really cool on this white background. Like, I think the red took away from the picture a little bit, but like, it just looks so good on that white background. Okay. And so when Jesus says that He doesn't give as the world gives, right, He's making a distinction between Himself and the world. And so that reminds me, or leads me to ask the question, really, how does the world give? And as much as I love Apple, I think Apple is a great example of how the world gives. Because every single year, they give us a brand new, updated, edited version of the iPhone. And each one is progressively better than the next, right? And so we even saw this past year, right? They gave us the iPhone 8 and then the iPhone X, because screw 9, you don't need it. But they gave us that within the span of like a month, right? They had the iPhone 8, and then everybody who bought the iPhone 8 like kicked themselves because they realized, oh crap, I could have waited like 2 more weeks and gotten the iPhone X. Like, it doesn't even make sense, and like the iPhone X is so much better, but that's how the world gives, right? Every single time that the world gives you something, it's temporarily satisfying you so that you can be filled and so that you can be given something else that is just a little bit better. That's just and it's always chasing after perfection. That's what the world gives, right? It gives you a constant chase after perfection. And every single time we end up short because the iPhone was not the iPhone 10 when it was first released, right? And so we start out with the iPhone, we start out with something really small and really basic, and we think, oh, this isn't such a big deal, and then, we get the updated versions every single time. And then we get to the iPhone 10 and we're like, holy crap, this thing makes the iPhone look like nothing, right? The original iPhone. And so now we've taken so much in from the world, and it looks so nice, and it looks so great, and it does so many different things, but then we realize it's only going to last until the next year. It's only going to last until I can get something a little better. I'm craving that next best thing, right? I absolutely shattered my iPhone 6. It was like the dumbest decision that I've ever made. I was riding my cruiser, which if you guys don't know what a cruiser is, it's like a mix between a skateboard and a longboard. And I had my iPhone in my front pocket by accident, which you should never have your iPhone in your front pocket while you're riding a skateboard. And so I was going down this hill at nighttime, and I hit a rock, and I fell forward and landed right on my phone. And so it totally shattered, right? So I had to get the iPhone 7 Plus, which is great. You know, like, it's a great phone, but I had to get it like the week before the 8 came out. And I couldn't last the week that it took in order for the iPhone 8 to come out, because I really, really need my phone because of all the things that had happened. It was like right at the beginning of the school semester, and like there was just so much happening that I needed a phone. I couldn't deal without it for a week. And so I got that iPhone 7 just behind the iPhone 8 release. I was so mad at myself, right? So mad at making that decision. But that's what the world does to you, right? The world will shatter your iPhone 6 and make you get a 7 Plus right before the 8 comes out. That's how the world gives to you, right? And so what he's saying here, what Jesus is saying here, is that we need things that are timeless. God gives us things that are timeless, that no matter how long we are in them or we are around them, he gives us things that are timeless, right? And God's timeless doesn't always match up with our timeliness, right? God's definition of timeless and the things that he's working and creating in and around us don't always match up with when we want to receive them, right? So, next third of the verse. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. I think the key word here is let, because let cues in on a decision, right? It's all a decision. It's all being informed by something, right? Which is what we talked about leading up to today, right? We have to establish patterns in our life. We have to identify the problems in our heart. We have to protect our heart from those problems, and we have to allow God to fix our heart through our decisions, right? Do not let, it's all a decision, do not let your hearts be troubled. And so God has already spoken, right? He's saying do not let, because God has already spoken to us. The enemy cannot do anything about the words that God has already spoken. All he can do is get you to forget. So the enemy will, after the words are in your heart, because that's where the words go once they're spoken to us. They go into our heart. They supply a perspective to us. And so once they are in our heart, the enemy will attack the heart to try and have us forget the words that he's spoken over our life. And so we need to protect from forgetting. And so that creates a worship through remembering. It's actually worship when you remember the things that God has spoken over you and that God has told you. It's a form of worship so that you can take God's past faithfulness and use it for your present being. It's a form of worship, right? And so the first thing that God supplies us with our new heart when we give it to him is peace. God gives us peace. The other part of verse 27 I want to look at is that first part. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. And so peace here, it's talking about, and really the word peace in the original Greek is implying a relationship, right? In this case, it's a relationship with God, right? It's God and Jesus really saying, I am leaving you this relationship that I have with God the Father, right? And so that made me think of Ephesians 19 and Ephesians 20, where it says, and what is the immeasurable greatness of his power towards us who believe, according to the work of his great might that he worked in Christ, when he raised him from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly places. In other words, the NIV and NLT will say, the same power that rose Christ from the grave lives in us. So when God is saying, and Jesus is telling the disciples, I give you my peace, he's saying, I give you my relationship. I give you my power, where I get my power from. The same peace that Jesus brought to the cross, right? The same peace that knows that he will rise even though they are putting him on a cross right now. The same peace that knows that the 33 to 36 years that he was on this earth were all purpose and destined for a bigger plan. Peace. And so we're fighting a fight that's already fought, right? And so we're living a life that's already bought. We're fighting a fight that's already fought, and we're living a life that's already bought. Boom. Right? Take it to the bank. That's Drake lyrics right there. If Drake sang that over a beat, you guys would be like dying in love right now. And so, right, we have to realize that the same power that has already won is in us, right? The things that God has accomplished, we have access to. The things that God has done for us, we can now do through our lives. And so, this relationship that we have with God creates a perspective for us, right? There's a certain perspective that is allowed us to be seen through the relationship that we have with God. In fact, I think that the way that you treat other people is the biggest indicator of how you see God. Because the relationship that you have vertically towards God affects the way that you treat people outwardly, right? And so maybe if you're working on some things in your life where you need to be better at reaching out, maybe you have to be stronger in looking up.
Yeah, that's good.
And so we have to be willing to look to God, to our relationship, in order for our relationship with other people to be strengthened. And so peace is also a perspective. When Jesus says, this peace that I give to you, this relationship that I give to you, if the relationship is a perspective, the peace is a perspective as well. There was one time Pastor Stephen said, provision is a perspective, right? I want to offer to you guys today, peace is a perspective. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's a perspective. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Instead, Mitch's study Bible says this. Peace is the most clear amid persecution and tribulation. In other words, it takes something fighting against you in order for you to experience peace. Yeah. And so usually we look at peace and we say, oh, well, since there's something fighting against me, I can't be in peace. But instead, peace is implied as only being able to be felt in the presence of something that's pushing back on it. And so Joyce Meyer, in her book, Battlefield of the Mind, which is an incredible read, I read Crash and Chatterbox by Pastor Stephen and then Battlefield of the Mind back to back. Really, really cool experience, right? Because they're both talking about the voices that we listen to and the power of our mindsets and the power of our choices and whatnot. Really cool read. But she was offering that something like this, that's not peace, right? We look at this and we even think about the sayings that we have. I just need some peace and quiet, right? When my kids were being too much to take care of while I was nannying, I was just like, I just need some peace and quiet. Just hush, hush. Go up to your room and read a book or play with your toys or something because I need a little break right now, right? I need some peace in my life. And we think that peace comes from everything being still. We think that peace comes from everything being calm. We think that peace comes from everything being controllable. But instead, that's peace. With everything that's going on around this cute little bird, it's showing peace, right? The waterfall is crashing down around it. Everything is out of its control. It cannot establish how the waters move. It can't influence anything that's being carried down the water, but it's just sitting In other words, it takes something fighting against peace in order for peace to be experienced, because peace is a perspective. Peace is not the lack of movement around us. It's the way that we look at the things in our life. Peace is a perspective. And so, sometimes, and what I want to challenge you with, is if you ever feel like you're experiencing no conflict at all, you should start to question that. You should start to really wonder, well, why am I not experiencing conflict? Because the conflict that we experience usually comes from the enemy, right? There are some things that God can do that we think isn't God, and He's challenging us in certain ways, and there's a certain level of resistance out of following God's commands that comes, right? There's a certain level of discomfort that we experience through following God's commands. And so if you're not experiencing a certain level of discomfort or uncomfortability, then we have to, in our relationship with God, look at that and say, well, how can I be in discomfort, right? Because even Tyler was saying at the group tonight, right? Like, he tries his best to keep himself in a place of discomfort because it's in the discomfort that he grows, right? And so some of that discomfort comes from God, but also a lot of it comes from the enemy, right? The enemy's voices trying to attack our thoughts, trying to attack our minds, trying to attack our decisions, trying to give us anxiety, trying to question what we've done. And so if you're not experiencing any of that conflict, maybe it's because you're not in God's plan.
Mm-hmm.
Because if peace can only be felt in the midst of tension, if there's no tension, the devil doesn't attack what's his.
Yeah.
The devil doesn't go after what's already his. And so maybe once you get to a point of no tension, of no conflict, of no struggle, maybe that is when the enemy is the one that's making the decisions for you. It's just a challenge today, right? Changing the way we look at peace. Next thing that we get from God with His heart that He gives to us is purpose. We get purpose. Specifically, I want to look at verse 29, where it says, "And now I have told you before it takes place, so that when it does take place, you may believe." Remember 2 weeks ago when I was talking about heart attack, I was talking about how God allows us to hear above where we are and allows us to see in front of where we are. In other words, we hear and see things that are not where we are yet. And now I have told you before it happens, so that when it does, you will believe, right? God will show us things and allow us to hear things so that, meaning there's a purpose behind the things that He's showing and telling us, so that we may believe. And so the purpose, and there always is a purpose behind God's words. There's always something that God is looking to show and say to us in order for us to understand what's coming. In other words, we have to walk before we understand, right? The obedience before the validation. We have to take what God is saying and take what God is hearing and start and go, okay, God, I know that you told me to do it, and I know that I heard you say it, so I'm going to do it now. And so when it comes, I'll understand it. But until then, until it comes, I'm just going to keep walking. I'm just going to keep going. Right? I'm just going to keep moving because I'm going to believe in advance what I only understand in reverse. Right? There's purpose behind every word that God gives us. And so, when we hear above and we look in front, it takes away the confusion of knowing whether or not there is a purpose behind something. It takes away the confusion when life is being thrown at you, and you can take a step back and go, hold on. I know that God's in here. I know that God is walking around me. I know that God is working in me. I just need to look for him. Oh, what did he tell me? What did he tell me? Oh, he said that, it's not going to be, it's not always going to be easy. I know that the enemy's going to attack our heart. We have to guard our heart because the enemy's going to attack it. And so this attack from the enemy, that makes sense now. I'm walking through it, and it makes sense. I'm not confused. I'm going to rely on his word. I'm going to rely on what he said. And I'm going to use what he has said to prepare me for what is coming. Right? The things that God allows us to hear that are above, and the things that he allows us to see that are beyond where we are to lead us into the path and the purpose that he has for our life. There's a purpose behind everything that we do. In other words, the patterns that we live out put us in a certain position for purpose later. We have to make certain decisions and establish certain patterns now before they make sense. We have to wake up and read our Bible, and once again, I preach to myself just as much as I preach to you guys. I don't ever want you guys to feel like I'm preaching at you and excluding myself from this. I need to wake up and read my Bible and do my daily devotional every single day, because that pattern puts myself in a certain position that allows me to access a certain purpose. Right? And so starting your day with God's word, starting your day with the things that haven't happened yet, will prepare you and position you for that when they come into your life, you will be able to use them for the right purpose. There's a connection between the patterns that we have and the purpose that we carry out. And so the last thing I want to talk about is protection. God gives us peace. And peace is a perspective, meaning God gives us his perspective. God gives us purpose and allows us to access a certain purpose, but he also gives us protection. He'll never leave us nor forsake us. Right? And so, verse 30, for the ruler of this world is coming, but he has no claim on me. He has no hold on me. In other words, God is saying, you're protected as long as you're with me. Right? Because there's a strong man who is the enemy. Meaning, the enemy has control over us, but there's a stronger man in God. And there's a stronger man in the power, in the protection, in the purpose, in the provision, in the protection that Jesus offers us. Because the enemy has no claim over him. The things that the enemy tried to work in Jesus' life and in and around Jesus and his disciples, it didn't work. The same disciples that fled from Jesus' cross and after Jesus' arrest, those same disciples would later see Jesus destroy death. In other words, completely wreck the enemy's plan. He went into the enemy's kingdom and absolutely defeated and destroyed him because he has no hold and has no claim over Jesus and Jesus' power. And so when Jesus then came out and exposed himself again to the disciples and allowed them to believe and allowed them to see the things that he has already done and that he has already gone through, he gives us a certain protection. So many other, when you think about this, when you look throughout history, there are so many other religions that were established as branches of Christianity. But where are all of them today? Only the truth will stand the test of time. And we follow a God who has stood the test of time over and over and over again, because no matter what the enemy puts in front of him, he is able to use and protect the people that he needs to in the purpose that he has through every single one of those people to work his kingdom on this earth. And so, when Jesus said, I do as the Father commanded, In other words, Jesus followed what God spoke, which lays out a pattern for our protection. In other words, the enemy had no claim on him because he did what God said. He was able to overcome the enemy because he never let the source of his actions be anything except God. And so the feelings of our heart that we are now given through God, we can trust them because the enemy has no claim and has no hold over him. And so the protection that he offers, as long as we do things as God has told us and keep ourselves in the right source, we can trust what God has given us. So the last thing in the chapter that Jesus says. He says, rise, let us go from here. Notice that he doesn't say, rise, let us go to there. He says, from here. God doesn't ask you to do anything outside of where you are right now.
That's good.
God doesn't say, hey, we're going to start with the destination in mind. He says, I need you to be faithful now. I need you to trust the path, not the destination. I need you to walk the way that is shaped by righteousness so that when you look back on your life and you look back on what God has done in your life, then you can say, that is the purpose. That is the reason. That is why God asked me to do this in the first place. There is a reason why we are where we are right now, and it's so that we can walk from here. In other words, the past 4 weeks have led us to here. And so now that we know how to deal with our heart, and now we know how to trust our heart, now we can go from here. And we can take the heart that we have and we can spread and share and take it beyond where we are currently. We can never go to there. We can only go from here.
Yeah.
So don't ever let yourself get so focused on the destination that you lose sight of the path that you're walking down. Because there's a purpose behind the path that you're walking. And so I'm going to end this in a time of prayer. God, we come to you